think it is on. Yeah.
No, it isn't. No, they're all getting that trouble.
Yeah.
I hope so. I'm gonna complain. Well, you have to put the third plug. Oh, the two. Oh. I just, you just turn the plug around. Yeah.
Well, I guess, should we, yeah, so, okay, 6:30, so, good evening, it's still light. Last time I was here, it was dark at this time. Good evening, I'm Robert Buxton, it's good to be back. I'm gonna play some classical piano and maybe some gospel, and just want to thank Larkin very much for having me. Let's give Larkin a round of applause, please. Yeah. And for knowing all the secret passageways. So, last time I did the crazy thing of playing a piano concerto with no orchestra. Today I'm going to focus on. I'm still doing this violin theme. It's really a tribute program to several people, but I'll start by explaining. The main person it's a tribute to is a violinist whose name was Ivry Gitlis, Gitlis. And he's I never met him, but actually I did send him a note in his later years, and he apparently got it and was very happy, so that makes me very happy. Ivry Gitlis was a violinist who, by the way he played and the way he spoke and the way he approached life, you could say, was so unique and special and inspiring and uplifting. You know, we need more of those people now. And he died a few years ago at the age of 98. He was still playing violin beautifully until his last year. And, you know, when he died, I just felt, I felt really sad, and I wanted to pay some sort of tribute to him. It was during the pandemic too, which was even, the context of that. So I decided I'm going to just play some of his repertoire on the piano and try to emulate his phrasing a little bit. Not copy, but, emulate, because he had a very unique way of phrasing. He wouldn't play things straightforward. He plays with a lot of, almost like a folk musician or a gypsy musician, klezmer musician. So then it turned out that I'm finding all these arrangements of violin music for piano, and they're good arrangements, they're not bad. So I've ended up, pretending to be a violinist for a really long time. And I thought it was going to come to a close soon, but apparently I found a whole stash of more music. So it's going to be, anyway, furthermore, this is a tribute to all the great violinists of the past who played these pieces, like Jascha Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, Yehudi Menuhin. He was friends with all of them, Gitlis, kind of outlived them all. But at any rate, I'm going to start with a piece that he liked to play. He was actually went to Japan many times when the earthquake and the disaster in 2011 happened, Ivry Gitlis, and he actually, when most people were leaving that region of Japan, he went there to play in schools and hospitals for people. And I think the Japanese government gave him a violin made out of wood that was salvaged from the tsunami. So it was not hurricane. Anyway, so this is called Song of the Seashore. It's a beautiful piece. Very, it's the soul of Japan. And the words, if I were to sing, I don't sing, nevertheless, not in Japanese. It's a man walking along the seashore reflecting on life. It's very nostalgic. But the sea is this big theme in Japan. The sea is both beautiful and also source of food and transportation, but it's also a great threat because Japan is an island, so the sea is the central theme of that. Look at Japanese art, it's all ocean, so here it is. The composer's Narita Tamezo, Song of the Seashore. Another piece that's very short that the Evergidlis used to play a lot is called, I think this one I may have played last time, I don't remember. So this is called Sicilienne by Maria von Paradis, except it's not by her. She was a great composer, but this is a forgery. It's actually by a violinist whose name was Samuel Dushkin, who claimed it was by her. And I think composers would do that because they'd be embarrassed to say, well, here's something I wrote. Well, no, if I were to play something and said, look, I found this somewhere in a library somewhere, it's a piece by Vivaldi, but I wrote it, maybe you would like it better. So I think that's the logic behind it. Yeah, and Evergidlis, that violinist I was speaking about, he played this, especially in his later years, very poignantly. And a Sicilian, it has a specific rhythm. It's in 3, and it's 1, 2, 3, bum, bum, bum. It's got a lilt to it, that rhythm. And there's so many things that have that. And you have Mozart, that's a Sicilian. Then you have Schubert, second musical moment, then you have Rachmaninoff, the B minor prelude. That's also a Sicilian. So that rhythm, Rousseau wrote about it, and he said that Swiss mercenaries would sing Sicilians when they were homesick. So that's what it's about. It's this 18th century dance that's connected with nostalgia and homesickness. So at any rate, another one is this one. This is the most famous one, probably. That's a Sicilian too. Da, da, da. That has a rhythm. So here is the Sicilian by von Paradis, but not really, by Dushkin. Sorry, it's a lot of names, and even I'm getting confused with what I'm saying. But here's a Bach piece arranged by Rachmaninoff. This is called Gavotte. It's from the third partita for solo violin. And the partitas, they're suites. Bach wrote many suites of dances that were popular at that time. The Gavotte was a French Baroque dance of that time. But yeah, Bach wrote many of these collections of dances for violin, for cello, for lute even, for harpsichord, for everything. And the thing is that Bach is primarily, we think of him correctly as a religious composer. He wrote cantatas almost every week, or maybe every week at some point. He was a church musician. He would write in Latin. He would write after every piece he wrote dedicated to the glory of God. So, I mean, he was very religious. I read somewhere that Bach may have had a biblical scene in mind for each of these dances that he wrote. Not proven, but it's an interesting thought. If that's the case, this, which I'm going to play this Gavotte. To me, it's Palm Sunday, which was yesterday. That's just what it is for me, but maybe for you, it's something else. You tell me. So originally for violin, something like that. Then Rachmaninoff puts some, meat to it, so to say. But it's more than that. Rachmaninoff, as the piece progresses, it becomes more and more Rachmaninoff, I think. And by the very end, it's Rachmaninoff. It's Russian music. So you can think of it as Bachmaninoff. They're really fused to. Some people call it that. So yeah, I tell very cheesy jokes. More on Rachmaninoff later. I'm going to do another don't even want to say it, it's scary. But yeah, Rachmaninoff's arrangements are tricky. So here are some Liszt arrangements of Paganini. I know I did one of these last time, but this one I either did back in the fall or I haven't played it at all here. I don't remember. But anyway, this is the famous or infamous La Campanella by Paganini, arranged here by Liszt first and then Busoni later. It's just a double pasteurization of it. So Paganini was this wild, controversial musician, violinist in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Some people were sure that he was possessed, and but the Romantics, they loved him, especially Liszt. And the young Liszt was rather depressed and living in Paris. I don't know why he was depressed in Paris, but that's beside the point. But he was stuck. He didn't really know what to do with himself. He had been sort of a prodigy, but then, I don't know, life happened. So, but he heard Paganini play. And this just shook him, and he locked himself up in a room to practice like crazy and emerged as the Liszt we know now. And he arranged a lot of Paganini for the piano to translate that virtuosity that Paganini had on the violin to the piano. So this piece, La Campanella, it means little bell. It's from the second violin concerto, last movement. I was listening to Ivry Gitlis playing it in the car, but this is a completely different piece from the original. It's so different. It's really like a fantasia on the theme. And when we're talking about arrangements, there's a whole spectrum. I mean, there's the more literal arrangements, like when I played the Fon Paradis, I did that arrangement, and it's not changed very much from the original. It's pretty, close. But this one is a whole different form and everything. But La Campanella means, like I said, did I mention little bell sound? So, because you're going to hear that constantly. It's almost obnoxious at some point. It's like a gnat or something in your ear, and they're coming back. I was getting gas, and this bee recently. This bee sat on me. I thought, well, maybe I should just leave it alone. And he just sat there for 15 minutes, and but they're back anyway. So I was thinking about that because when he flew away, I could really hear this La Campanella. So. Well, I told you he was controversial, yeah. Oh.
Was that list?
Well, this Paganini list.
Okay.
Busoni also, because this is Busoni's version of Liszt. Well, okay, it gets very confusing. So Liszt did in the 1830s the first draft of these pieces. I'll play one more of them. And then he revised them in the 1850s, changed them because I don't know. And then Busoni, around the early 20th century, late 19th century, made his own version of these. And I like them all, but I really like Busoni's because he adds some interesting effects. So that's as much Busoni as it is Liszt as it is Paganini. So it's three of them. So I'm going to do one more, which this one I did last time. This is La Chasse, the hunt. And there was someone here, I don't know if I was talking to, who hunts or had hunted before and was telling me that they envisioned this whole scene when I played this. Because I don't hunt. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and there's nowhere to hunt there. I mean, I hunted for some good Italian bread, but I never really. So this is the piece, and that's the sound of horn calls. They would use horn calls during hunting, and I guess it had some function to attract animals and such. And this gentleman last time who was here, he told me that they still use certain types of horn calls or brass or something in hunting today. So it's interesting. I thought they didn't. I made this silly joke. I said, well, you had to use something. You couldn't go to Walmart and buy a duck whistle like nowadays. So how would this piece sound if it was written as well? Anyway. But this is originally for solo violin, just like the Bach that I did. And of course, Liszt and Busoni in this case. Well, Busoni didn't change this one too much from Liszt. It's imitating the violin in a very interesting way because, like, for example, here, that's a very violin technique, the slide, the glissando. And to do it on a piano, I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis will do that, but it's very interesting how the violin here translates to the piano. So here is The Hunt, La Chasse by Paganini, Liszt, Busoni, all of the above. Thanks. On one of the glissandi, you're supposed to use your nails to do the rrr, and it's sort of like a snowplow, it should. Well, somehow this part of my skin ended up playing it, but it looks like we're okay. So, yeah, I was stupid the other day. They say you're supposed to protect your hands, and you should if you play an instrument, but in general. Although my Russian teacher, Vladimir Viargo, very Russian, he was always, he didn't like when people were fastidious about their hands. He told me a story about Rostropovich. He knew Rostropovich very well. He knew Richter very well. I was lucky with my teachers, And he said Rostropovich apparently had a student come to his apartment in Moscow. They had a lesson, and Rostropovich, if you've seen, he was a big bear of a man, and he was installing a door in his apartment himself because he just liked to do those things. So did my teacher. And he asked the student, all right, help me with this door. And the student said to Rostropovich, I'm afraid of my hands, He said, okay, well, you're not my student anymore. So it's pretty harsh. So, but I was opening this, I learned my lesson about good eating, correct eating, because we had these, I don't know why we had this cookie plastic bin from Walmart, and I opened it and it cut my finger. So that was a sign that I shouldn't. Anyway, so where were we? Okay, this is a piece that is really a vocal piece, and there is a version for violin by Misha Elman, who is a great violinist from Odessa. But Ivry Gitlis, who I spoke about, he didn't play this, at least I can't find. But I wanted to play this here because it's an interesting contrast for Liszt. You just heard Liszt's, two of his arrangements that were very fiery and very virtuosic. And that is certainly a side of Liszt. In his original pieces, like the concerto I did last time, and his arrangements, is this, wild virtuosity. In part because the piano, the modern piano, has this metal thing called a cast iron frame, which was a relatively new technology in the 1830s, allowing pianists to do things like that without breaking the piano. If Beethoven did that, and he did on Viennese pianos, the strings would snap, and he was known as the piano destroyer, but that's not really his fault. But the technology in the French and the British pianos in the 1830s, that they started using this cast iron frame. And a lot of people took advantage of that. There was a guy named Dreischock, and I don't know of his music very well, but there's a story about him that one newspaper critic said that he played so loudly that if the wind was right, you could hear him in Vienna from Paris. So, but Liszt was part of this, but he was more than that. Liszt had many sides to him. Did you know he wanted to be a priest throughout many times in his life? Actually, seriously, his father told him not to, but in later years he lived in the Vatican. He wore a priest's garments, and there's actually a story, I don't know if it's true, but he was going to be ordained. He was quite in a difficult period in his life, very sad. He wanted to become a priest, but there was a piano in the Sistine Chapel. He started playing, all the nuns fainted, and the cardinal came and said, you got to get out of here. This is not going to work. Because he was also like a rock star of his time. So at any rate, but Liszt was not shrewd, but he was shrewd, but he had many sides to him, and he developed an introspective side as well. That's very important. First, through meeting Chopin, they were the same age. Chopin somewhat looked down at him, but that's another story. And he discovered the music of Franz Schubert. If Paganini was the fire that inspired him, Schubert was the lyricism and introspection. Because Schubert, we know him today in large part because Liszt arranged his songs, his lieder, for the piano and performed them in his tours. Liszt was a very philanthropic fellow, and it's great what he did to promote Schubert. Schubert died at 31, penniless and unknown in Vienna. But it was people like Liszt who, resurrected his music and brought it, So here is the famous Ständchen or Serenade by Schubert. It's from his Schwanengesang, Swan Song, set of lieder or songs. which he wrote at the very end of his life. He was very ill and knew his time was limited, and so he wrote this, among other things, in his last even months of life. It's quite astounding to think of it. So you've probably heard this before, but this is Liszt's, twist on it, his version of it. I'll now play, this I probably did last time. This is some music of Dvorak. Here is the songs my mother taught me, arranged by a Russian composer, Edward Schut, German name, but Russian. This is, it's originally for voice, but this is played on the violin very often. Chrysler arranged it. The words are something like, I recall the songs my mother taught me, and now I sing them to my children. It's heavily influenced by gypsy music, which is the music that Dvorak grew up around. He was Czech, so that's the music of Eastern Europe mainly. And so here it is, the songs my mother taught me by Antonin Dvorak. This one, I'm going to just play it and then I'll speak about it after. I'll tell you why later. This is called Liebesfreude, Love's Joys, by Fritz Kreisler, and it's arranged by Sergei Rachmaninoff. Again, he did the Bach arrangement in the beginning. It's a little longer than the other pieces I've done, and it's quite crazy in a way. But let me play it first and then talk about it. I'll just tell you now, it's a Viennese waltz. A Viennese waltz is not a regular waltz, no, but it has a little hiccup on the second beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's, you know, that's a Viennese waltz, and so is this. So anyway, Fritz Kreisler, Liebesfreude, arranged by Rachmaninoff. That's the trickiest thing ever. So here's the story about the piece, and you'll see why I tell it afterwards. I've played the companion, the first part of this Liebesleid, Love's Sorrows, which goes. And this one is just to play. It's so impossible. I don't know why, but I couldn't memorize. It took me 3 months. So, yeah, they were big friends. Chrysler was a sort of he was Viennese, left Vienna when the Nazis came into power because he was escaping, of course, anti-Semitism. He was Jewish, and he came to the U.S., lived in New York. He was a wonderful, warm-hearted person, maybe the best violinist ever, wonderful composer, hated to practice, and I'll get back to that. You know, he was this kind of thin guy with a mustache, always smiling in photos. When he went to perform, he would say, "I'm not going to perform, I'm just going to see my friends." So that's kind of what we're doing. I mean, it's a nice way to look at it. Rachmaninoff, they were friends, but Rachmaninoff was the opposite in so many ways. I mean, he left during the Russian Revolution, came to the U.S., ended up in Beverly Hills, California. I don't know why, but that's his business. So, 6.5 feet tall. He had a shaved head. He never smiled in photos. And Stravinsky said he looked like an escaped convict. So, story within a story. Let me tell you, maybe I told you this before, but it's a great story. My grandfather met Rachmaninoff. He was an usher for one of his recitals in Richmond, Virginia in the 30s. My grandfather's no longer here. And he was told to, block these doors, like those doors. And, well, someone tried to open the door, so my grandfather pushed back. There was a little, struggle. And wham, the door was kicked open. And it was Rachmaninoff himself, 6.5 feet tall. And I tell people, I don't tell the whole story, I say, Rachmaninoff spoke to my grandfather. He did. He said 4 words. You know what he said? "Get out of my way." Get out of my way. He was so mad. So I have this personal connection to Rachmaninoff. It's a wonderful thing. So here's the story about Chrysler and Rachmaninoff. Chrysler was on violin, Rachmaninoff on piano. They were giving a recital in Carnegie Hall. So Chrysler, who never practiced, didn't need to maybe, but he was playing, he got lost in the piece. That's why I tell this after I play. Because that piece is terrifying. There's a lot of rocks, hidden rocks in there, like shipwrecks can have. So he's playing, and he got lost, and Rachmaninoff's at the piano. And Rachmaninoff, when he played, he never moved at all. He was just like, stone. So he comes to Rachmaninoff and says, "Where are we?" And Rachmaninoff mutters, "Carnegie Hall." It didn't help. Yeah. So, at any rate, speaking of story, I'm going to play a couple more classical and then a couple short gospel. I think we're getting too late, sort of late. So, yeah, this piece I'm going to play in tribute to my wonderful piano teacher, Solomon Mikowski, who died last week. 2 of my major mentors died last week. Pete Gunter, who was a philosophy professor in Texas, he died, and then Solomon Mikowski, I studied with him for 8 years in New York. So I'm thinking of both of them a lot right now, obviously, and getting over the stomach bug. It's not there anymore, so I'm a little depleted. My philosophy teacher, I'll tell you just real quick, did French philosophy, he's very sophisticated, and he went to Oxford and Yale and everything, but he was a salt of the earth Texan who would call me up, and we had our meetings at like a steakhouse type thing. He would say, he wore this Stetson hat, "Robert, meet me down at the square. We're gonna have chicken fried steak, talk about French philosophy." Total Texan. And he even did a country album. He's a great musician too. He did a country album of country songs about French philosophy. Oh, thank you so much, I appreciate it. It's called Chicken Fried Escargot. So just to give you an idea. So it's too many stories I'm saying. So my teacher, Solomon Mikowski in New York, he was from Cuba. His parents were Polish-Russian, but he was from Cuba. And he was very Cuban, and he wrote a book about Cuban music. This piece is called Adios a Cuba by Ignacio Cervantes, who was a Cuban composer in the 19th century. And this piece, he wrote it when he left Cuba for the last time, as my teacher Mikovsky did when the revolution happened. I think he returned in more recent years, but still, to leave his whole culture, his whole country behind. And I would play this for him. He pointed out that I did not get the style at all, which is probably true, but I still feel compelled to play it, in his honor. So it's a short piece, get a little water, and just, my tribute to him, because I love him very much. And so yeah, Adios a Cuba by Cervantes. Play one more sprightly piece. This is a piece called Guitar by Moritz Moskowski, a Polish composer, but it has a Spanish theme. And I just realized now that Moskowski was one of the first composers that my teacher, Mikovsky, has similar names, assigned to me, because Moskowski taught one of his major teachers, actually. So there's kind of a lineage. It's interesting. This piece was very popular at the time, 100 or so years ago, and Sarasate arranged it for violin. That's why it's on my violin program here. And but Moskowski's not so popular today, and I have a theory about that. I think it's because his music is very cheerful, and I think a lot of the classical music folks, with all due respect, they only want to do the downer pieces, like the last one, the really sad ones, or only those. If it's happy, then it can't be serious. But comedy can be a pretty serious business. Look at Mozart's operas; they're all comic and quite deep at the same time. So here it is. Oh, so good, water. couple short gospels and then we'll call it a day. So here is I'd Rather Have Jesus by George Beverly Shea. I'll do one last one, very short. It's short. So this is called All Day, All Night, I Know the Angels Will Be Watching Over Me, Southern Gospel. thank you. Have a wonderful evening. It's been great to be here, as always. Thanks, Lark. Sorry I went a little over, but sorry.
Okay, well, you get carried away.